it's really rather great, and it was something that we didn't realize we could do until much later in the game. This movie, a lot of the better things that I'm most proud of were decisions made in editing, which happens on most movies, and on this film, there's no, I learned a lot. I learned stuff I never knew. This was definitely an education, this movie. So now we're back in Williamsburg, and this is a sequence that sort of brought the movie a little bit of controversy. The film, when it was released, got a lot of very good reviews, and it had played a lot of film festivals and had been well received. But the Village Voice in New York thought that the movie was racist. They thought that it was not about racism, but they actually thought the film itself, i.e. me, was a racist. And they pointed out specifically this scene where John is beat up by these black kids in a car, and they sort of said that I was fitting into all these stereotypes. And that was very upsetting to me, first of all, because I thought the movie was specifically about race, and that Ruby sent Frank to these neighborhoods because she knew that he'd be scared, that it was outside of the Upper East Side controlled world that he was used to. So she wanted to mess with him. She even says so. Another thing was that these guys, if you listen carefully, are beating him up because they are sick of white people just killing black people with their drugs. I mean, that's an actual line. So I don't know. It's a difficult thing. Whenever you make a movie that deals with race in any level, you're bound to offend some people. And I'm proud of the statement I made. I was very interested in the way New York was going in the early 90s and on the class differences, and I wanted to write about it. The story itself is actually based on a true story that happened to someone I knew in high school when she was younger. She was kidnapped, and it always stuck with me. It's such an interesting story, and her father was made to run all over New York, just like John Rubinstein's character. And it turns out that she was kidnapped by her maid's boyfriend. I mean, I basically lifted her story. Of course, I fictionalized everything. But the thing that struck me most was that she was interviewed in the paper and was quoted as saying, and she was like 10 years old at the time, but she was quoted as saying that she was taken to the worst place in the world, which turned out to be she was taken from 83rd and 5th to 97th and 5th. But to her, it was the worst place in the world because it was so different than the world she was living in, and it was only 15 blocks, and certainly 97th Street's a perfectly nice neighborhood. But I just thought it was interesting, the sheltered lives that certain people live, and I kind of wanted to explore that and deal with it, and that was sort of the impetus for the movie, which is why when I optioned it in the studio system, I didn't want to cut out all that stuff, because that's why I wrote it in the first place. I mean, those are the reasons I wanted to make this movie. And I was able to do it. Now, these scenes here with Amber and Sam this is one of the best scenes between them in the movie. They're just great. And it's just 2 shots, but there's between them, just 2 over the shoulders, but an incredible amount of energy and great acting. And, we all know now that Sam is sort of one of the best young actors working in Hollywood right now. And it was quite obvious to us even back then. Since we only had 2 days to shoot all of this apartment stuff, we had some issues with Rhea Silverstone, who plays Nicole, the little girl. I mean, that's why she's not in a lot of these shots, because first of all, she was a kid and she couldn't work 16-hour days. And another thing was that there was actually laws, and as much as we lied, cheated, and steal to make this movie, you really can't lie, cheat, or steal in child labor laws, nor did we want to. So at a certain point, she really could only work like 6 hours a day. And so we were stuck doing these scenes and having to shoot without her a lot of the time. And the second night we were doing this apartment, I needed a shot of her. It was the last shot of her in the movie for her, and I needed it. And her hours were done, and it was in the middle of the night. And her mom was like, we're leaving. And I said to her, I have one more shot, and if I don't get it, I don't know what I'm going to do, because we're never coming back to this location. I have no money to reshoot, and it's a very important shot. And it would only take a half hour, I said to her. And I basically had gotten along with them fine, and I think I was being totally honest with her. And she said, "Well, let me ask Rhea what she thinks." And she asked her, and she said this very funny quote. She said, "The man must have his dream, or let the man have his dream," which was like an incredibly interesting comment from an 11-year-old. So she agreed to do it, and sort of she caught exactly what this movie was to me. It was a dream. It was everything that was important to me. I had put aside my whole life to do this movie. I was spending my own money. I had given up a real career as a screenwriter in Los Angeles to come to New York to spend a year working on this film and in getting it done in post-production. And there was no way I couldn't finish it and couldn't do it. And I had a lot of my good friends' money in it. My friends had a lot of faith in me, and I certainly wasn't going to let them down. So when she said, "Let the man have his dream," she was pretty right. This chase scene was actually supposed to be filmed in the basement of this building, but there were so many rats there. They were literally falling from the ceiling. And the crew would not go down there, and we were afraid one was going to fall on Rhea's head. And I personally had no interest in having a rat fall on me. So we ended up just doing it in the hallway, but it works fine. So John, this is a sequence where John is waking up having been beat up, and he's about to head back to New York and deal with his problems at home, which are about to happen. We used a number of zooms in this movie. Here's one right here, which is very sort of a 70s film aesthetic, and something that I wanted to do because I wanted the film to have a 70s aesthetic. I almost went so far as to find out if Kodak had any film left over from the 70s that was sitting in a refrigerator that we could use, because I was upset that the Kodak film had gotten so good. Because my favorite movies are French Connection and Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. Those 70s New York movies had a great grain. Anyway, shooting Super 16 gave us the grain, so I was happy about that. But the zoom was something I had never used before. I was always afraid of the zoom and always sort of thought it looked cheesy. And upon meeting Sarah Collier, our DP, I said to her, "What do you think of zooms?" And she said, "I hate them." And I said, "I hate them too, but I got to be honest with you, I'm going to use them a lot in this movie." And she sort of laughed, and I think she thought I was crazy. But the fact of the matter was we ended up using it a lot. We started loving it, and it sort of adds a real flavor to the film. I mean, here's an easy one, a small one, but we were using them in very aggressive ways, certainly during some of the action scenes later. This sequence here in the apartment, this is the FBI are there, basically a bunch of friends and free extras. And the woman, Jane Lanier, who's playing Frank's ex-wife, is actually John Rubinstein's now ex-wife, then wife. And John asked me if I would audition her for a small part in the movie, but I told him there's really no small parts unless she wants to play a transvestite prostitute, which I think she probably would have enjoyed playing, but I was kind of joking. But I said there is, the ex-wife character, and she auditioned and she was great. And I thought, wow, this is absolutely perfect because, they're married. They're both in New York. She just had a baby. And I also thought, beyond her being a good actress, I also was thinking, John Rubinstein could drop out of this movie at any minute if he gets a paying job. And having her in the movie is a sure way to keep him committed as well. And at that point, if John had dropped out, the whole movie would have fallen apart. Because the thing is, I wasn't paying him anything. SAG had said I had to pay $75 a day, and I basically told John, if you're going to be in this movie, I'm going to pay you, and then you're going to have to pay me back because I don't have the money. And I can't fly you to New York from Los Angeles, and I can't put you up. And I can't pay you a per diem. I can't pay you. In fact, you're going to pay me by giving me back the money. But I can promise you this great role, and I can promise you professional people working hard to make a great movie. And John basically, I don't know, he just a crazy moment in his life. He said, okay. He said, if I don't get another job in the next 2 months, I'll do your movie. And of course, I've never really prayed at night for an actor to not get work, but I certainly was, because if he had gotten an episode of Murder, She Wrote, he probably would have done it instead of our movie because, they would be paying something. But he basically committed, and his commitment to our film was the reason the movie was able to get really made, because he added a legitimacy. He was a Tony Award-winning actor. He's been nominated for Emmys. He'd been on TV. People in New York knew who he was. He didn't mean anything. He wasn't going to bring us any financing, but he was a sort of a name that made us not seem like every, no-budget movie that didn't star anyone famous. And so his getting involved was very important. He helped get us the casting director, who ended up bringing in Sam Rockwell and Amber Cain, and his professionalism, his lack of complaining. He never complained that there wasn't a trailer. He never complained when it wasn't cold, and he was cold a lot of the time, and he wished that he had a trailer. And the crew and the cast looked at him and said, if he's not complaining, we're not going to complain. And it really made this film possible. And I've told him as much. And also, he's so good in it. It's such a difficult role. I think it's the best he's ever been. He's got to play someone who is very unlikable, and yet you have to care for him. And he pulls it off. And I think that's why he did the movie. I think that was the challenge that made it interesting to him. But I must say, I don't know if I've ever been as gutsy as I was the day I sat with him and basically told him that I wasn't going to pay him anything, and he had to, pay me back for the money I was going to pay him. But there was no choice. The interesting thing is that he ended up getting paid his full salary, because the movie ended up making its money back. We sold it in Europe and to HBO, and he saw some profits. So his gamble paid off for him. I'm happy about that. Phil Brock is the actor who plays the detective Phil Klein. And I actually wrote the part for him, 4 years before, because I had worked with him and I thought he was great. And I didn't want an older actor playing the FBI guy. It's sort of the stock role. It's sort of played by, it was played by Delroy Lindo in Ransom, played this exact part. And usually it's just sort of some weathered guy. And I wanted a younger person. I just wanted him to spice it up just a little bit, because it's sort of a stock character. It's one of the most thinly written characters in the whole movie. And so I cast Phil, who's a very interesting and funny actor. And 3 years later, when we ended up making it on our own, I said to him, hey, you have any interest in coming to New York and working for free for me for 2 weeks? And he did, and he's great in the movie. This, just to finish that scene that you just saw where they're listening to tape of Ruby calling, there was definitely some discussions in the editing room about how much we should see Ruby's mother, Angela the maid, because we didn't want to tip our hat that she knew that it was her daughter on the phone, but we wanted to see her making a little bit of a connection. So that scene, which is relatively easy, there's only like 5 shots. It took a long time to edit because we were putting in and taking out shots of Angela. This is another scene in the apartment that is basically one take. We have a close-up of Sam a little later on, in which we cut to it so that we can change takes. But basically, this is a one-shot scene. Again, it was done for time, but it works because these actors are so good. If you listen carefully, you can hear the dolly squeak on this. I mean, we were in a tiny apartment. We had no sets, and we had this wood floor. This building had been condemned, which is why we got to shoot it in it for free. But so whenever we did a dolly in this room, you heard squeaking. But we did it all basically in one shot, and it works.